Welcome everybody to this latest FIDIC webinar in our 2023 State of the World series. I'm delighted to say that today's event is being supported by Schneider Electric, who have contributed to the report. My name is Tony Barry and I am the FIDIC President. For those who may not be aware, this year is a very significant one for FIDIC, as it is our 110th anniversary of our formation back in 1913. We will be celebrating that milestone throughout the year and especially at our Global Infrastructure Conference in Singapore in September. So keep your eyes open for what we have planned and please do celebrate that with us. You'll also see on your screen now a number of upcoming events that we have, including the Golden Principles in Business Practice, a webinar we're going to hold on the 11th of July, and a further webinar, which is another State of the World report, which is going to be held on the 26th of October. So that those events, hopefully you will enjoy. Today's webinar is really to address our digital technology on a path to net zero. The report is online and you can see there the link on your screen, which I hope you'll take an opportunity to download. In the 2022 FIDIC series we released our first State of the World report on digitalisation titled Digital Disruption, the Evolution of the Infrastructure Sector, which explored how technology continues to evolve at an unprecedented pace. Whilst most believe this is a new phenomenon, the pace of technological change and the need for business to invest and maintain a relevant skills base have always been essential. The report found that not only is the pace of change faster, but the companies and the people we deal with today may not be the ones who are dealing with it in 10 years' time. We discussed the role of technology as a potential disruptor to industries, changing their business model, and as a result, shifts in technology, data, and how a combination of customers, clients, and the sector can access and use such information. Importantly, it also explored the role of technology as an innovator, something which drives real change and improvement. The previous report, however, while exploring the changing attitudes and environment in which the infrastructure sector is operating, did not go into the detail of the current technological use, change, and how it applies to agendas such as carbon reduction and net zero. The recent Global Leadership Forum Summit that was organised by FIDIC in April in Geneva emphasised the importance of this topic, demonstrating not only interesting technological change in carbon reduction, but also an increasing need to understand how technologies will evolve, talk to each other, and share data and inform decision-making as we go forward. This report, using a combination of desk research and discussion, starts to focus in and take a deeper look into how this change is occurring within the infrastructure sector and how this change also links with the reduction in carbon emissions we aspire to achieve. Interestingly, while technology is the driver, implementation of real change and the use of technology is found to go hand in hand with how companies and stakeholders collaborate, design their systems to interact, and their views on future-proofing and avoiding being locked in. There are many lessons to be learned in this space, and no doubt you'll read about and hear about some of those in tonight's webinar. We also consider there are many lessons to be learned from the COVID pandemic and the rapid rate of change with which we were able to respond. Companies have found themselves in a situation where the systems that would have taken many, many months to implement, if not years, were in operation within weeks. And it's a great credit to our industry that they were able to adapt so quickly and achieve tremendous impetus in doing so. This report also looks at the development of technology and how it's being used across the various sectors, from energy and railways through to improving and retrofitting buildings. Provides insight into the fact that a number of emerging technologies such as AI are already being used and are already having a very significant effect on the way we procure, design, construct, and operate and maintain infrastructure. So I hope you'll enjoy tonight's webinar. We have an international panel of speakers who are digital technology experts, and hopefully we'll be able to offer you some opportunity to increase your understanding of how they might support you on a path to net zero. So today's webinar is an important one, and I'll ask Graham Ponton in a few minutes, our Director of Policy, to introduce the speakers to you. But before we do, I'd like to pose the question to you: is artificial intelligence the answer to designing lower carbon infrastructure? And there's two opportunities for answers there, yes or no, and we'll give it about 30 seconds to gauge your response. Okay, that's a pretty close split. So Graham, with that, I'll hand over to you to introduce our speakers. Thank you.
Thank you, Tony. Can we go to the next slide, please? So what I'm going to do is I will introduce the speakers, but first, before we get to that, I'm going to ask Basma to go through some of the findings of the report. Tony's already highlighted some of them, but just for some context, I'd like to begin with, if we go to the next slide, the challenge we're looking at for meeting net zero is quite significant, and the climate challenge is across all areas from adaptation, mitigation, and impact. And this is a significant challenge, and it is going to be a challenge that is not going to be separate from the challenge of digital technology. If we look in the context that, if we go to the next slide, you can see that there's actually a number of varying complicated trends that interact with this challenge, such as population growth, developing country growth, fertility rates, and sort of cost of capital and various political tensions. So this is one of those things that is going to continue to be a challenge going forward, but it is one that we have to try and solve if we're generally going to get to net zero. We go to the next slide, please. You'll turn around and see within this that this report very much takes on from the first one, and as Tony said, the future is now. A lot of the infrastructure we're building now will certainly be here in 2030 and has to meet the challenge of the SDGs, but will also need to be here for 2050 in a likelihood. So it's important that we turn around and actually start addressing these challenges now. I put this graphic up from the last report just as context because it is interesting, and it was alluded to. The pace of change is getting faster and faster. If you look at the companies on the screen, the average length of a company now is 34 years, and that is being brought down significantly by modern companies that have lifespans that are not traditional. The only exception in that list, for example, is Nintendo, that started as a playing card company in 1889 and technically wasn't considered a tech company till probably the 80s. So the importance of collaboration and how we work is going to become more important because the players of the game may change significantly moving forward. And then just before I introduce Basma, I'd like to put the next slide up just to actually highlight to people an interesting bit of research that featured in both reports. And that is the implementation of digital skills was found to be positively associated with employment of high-skilled workers. And overall, even if you took low-skilled workers into account, it had a positive effect. But interestingly, if you look at the effect, there was no significant impact from the investment of digital technologies where they did not adopt anything that was sort of machine-based. So any technologies that were implemented, just such as e-commerce platforms, cloud systems, they actually had very little positive impact on companies. So the AI piece and the revolution is already happening, even though we may not recognize it. And with that, I would like to hand over to Basma, who will give a summary of the report and its findings.
Well, digitalization on a path to net zero is our first State of the World report for 2023 and our second in the digitalization series. It addresses the fusion between digitalization and sustainability by trying to answer the pressing question of whether the development of digital systems is necessary to achieve net zero. Given the two drivers of change that have emerged in the last few years, the race in the digital space has taken on a completely new phase. The first of these is the pandemic, which has accentuated the value of automation, remote monitoring, data-driven forecasting, and digital collaboration in general. The second would be the growing urgency of climate action and the energy transition, for which new energy systems of increasing complexity and diversification are being created globally in an amazing speed. Organizations that lead with data and new technologies gain profitability and market share while also advancing towards shared social and environmental goals. The report looks into the profound and transformative impact of digitalization on the infrastructure sector's mission to achieve carbon reduction goals. Building on our 2022 report on digital disruption, this report uncovers the pace of change and the pivotal role of technology as both a disruptor and an innovator across industries. It unveils the critical importance of digital disruption, as well as digital systems in optimizing resource utilization, empowering decision makers with data-driven insights, and revolutionizing how we approach sustainability. And with this, we drive our first recommendation, which is to embrace the transformative power of digital systems and to capitalize on technology's potential to facilitate data-driven decision-making and to optimize resource utilization. With technology as our ally, we can smoothly integrate renewable energy sources, as well as adapt an array of sustainable practices necessary to facilitate our journey towards carbon reduction. An essential concept explored in this report is technology agnosticism, which is a philosophy that champions adaptable digital solutions, not bound by the constraints of specific technologies, but by embracing this mindset, the infrastructure project can safeguard their agility, sidestepping the danger of technology being obsolete. The report also looks at the paramount significance of standardization and interoperability, ensuring the seamless integration of digital solutions and consolidating our ability to future-proof our endeavors. The report also dwells on the transformative potential of technology in procurement and contact management and how crucial it is to reach significant levels of efficiency and transparency. With this, we derive our second recommendation, which is to prioritize adaptability and interoperability and the implementation of machine-based technologies. As the report moves along the journey of sustainable infrastructure, it dwells on both pioneering projects and retrofitting existing infrastructure as well. We have inspiring case studies provided by our contributors as our guide. We witness how technology is reshaping the landscape of smart cities and green buildings, rejuvenating sustainable transportation systems. It explores as well how digital solutions can be deployed to retrofit existing infrastructure and enhance energy efficiency while reducing carbon emissions and prolonging lifespan. Which brings us to the third recommendation, to drive innovation through technology. The report also looks on how the COVID-19 pandemic has served as a catalyst for the rapid adoption of digital technologies in the infrastructure sector. It discusses real-life lessons learned from this experience, including the pace of technology change, the rise of remote work, and the importance of digital resilience. The speed at which technological change and digital adoption came about in weeks or maybe days in what would have previously taken months lost between policies, governance, and implementation shows how the speed of adaptability is possible not only when the need is pressing, but also when you get stakeholders having a first-hand impact of the complications, something we need to dwell on when we come to talk about climate change. For recommendation number 4 that is driven from this point is to seize the momentum of change, to capitalize on the lessons learned from the pandemic's profound impact on the infrastructure sector. The report also looks at collaboration and technology and how they emerge as inseparable components in sustainable infrastructure development. By embracing data sharing, interoperability, and stakeholder engagement, we unlock the full potential of technology in driving sustainable infrastructure development. And the report also presents compelling examples that demonstrate the power of collaboration between governments, private sectors, and local communities to harness technology to drive sustainability in infrastructure. And from this, we come to our 5th recommendation, which is to cultivate collaborative ecosystems. Yet, of course, this transformative journey does not come without its challenges. So the challenging traditional perceptions is a critical aspect, actually, of the digital journey. The report addresses the barriers and the challenges that hinder the adoption of digital technologies in the infrastructure sector, such as cybersecurity concerns, data privacy, and upfront costs. It advocates for a shift in the mindset to embrace innovation and cultivate a culture of digital transformation. We have included real examples of global incidents where the insights and strategies for overcoming these challenges are presented, which would hopefully empower stakeholders to embrace change and drive sustainable infrastructure. which drives us to the sixth and final recommendation that we have here, which is to overcome barriers and embrace innovation, to champion a cultural shift that challenges conventional mindsets, embraces innovation by implementing strategies and best practices that can help facilitate that. And with that, I encourage you all to download the report, and I'm positive that you will find some valuable insights. Thank you. Back to you, Graham.
Thank you, Basma. And for those on the webinar, the report links can be found in the chat, so you can find them easy. It's now my pleasure to invite the panel members. We've got an esteemed panel that cover a variety of sectors, but also geographic locations. We've got Stacey Van Doler Evans, who is from Schneider Electric, Professor Jianping Wu from Tsinghua University. We've got Sophia Harlow, who's from Beal & Co, Fabian Summer, who's from Lombardi, Marcial Riviera Rodriguez, who's from CFIA, and then there's Basma and myself and Tony from FIDIC. So what I'm going to ask each of the panelists to do is I'll ask them in the order on the presentation to come in, say 3 to 4 or 5 minutes on what they think of the sort of areas the report covers. I will then, as moderator, be cheeky and pose a first question to them, just to get the conversation started. We'll then hand over to the next panelist, and then when we get to the end, we'll open up for some questions between the panelists and also to the floor. So Stacey, would you like to go first, please?
Thank you, Graham, and thank you very much for being here with everyone else. It's great to be here with such like-minded people. So I think a lot of it, like say, we're all going to talk on the report, so I don't want to dwell too much on going over that. But for me, it's of its time. It's about the combination of sort of the multiple IPs and intelligence and experience of the people who are involved in the report. We're all from very different backgrounds, and the diversity of age and also geolocations where we came together from. But really, that move towards more partnering collaboration. It's a way that's the way we're really going to drive and meet to achieving these net zero goals and decarbonisation of existing building assets. And obviously, there's a lot more of those there are than new assets, and they've been there a lot longer, which is more of a challenge for the West rather than some of the emerging countries such as India and Egypt and places like that, where they're building from new really and can go to net zero and digitization from day one. So it's a different question for them. So, and I think a clients now and governments and policy holders, people come with policies and stuff, they're looking for us to advise them. They're looking for this collective group to really try and support them with how they answer these difficult questions.
Thank you. I mean, you mentioned collaboration. I mean, there's a lot of procurement that happens in the infrastructure sector. And how have we got to adopt modern procurement approaches and strategic sourcing and collaboration within these things to be more flexible to move forward? Because it can at times be very linear. So I'd be interested on your views of how you've managed that at Schneider.
That's a very good question. So the elephant in the room, I would say here, is really the traditional procurement methods. So they're just no longer fit for purpose. They look at things in isolation. They look at things like by line. There's a lot of silos in this whole process. So the players in the model aren't incentivized to look at the whole life cycle of the building and the assets, as an example. And they tend to focus on it as a project by project, which generally leads to a kind of race to the bottom. So I think there's kind of a modernization of that. Technology and climate requirements are really outpacing sort of the contracts that we've always kind of worked to. So, take NEC4 as an example. Last revision, sort of excluding AMC and FMC, was in 2017. Yet we've seen a rapid acceleration of, requirements that have really changed. And I was reading an article recently from ICE, who kind of defined some of those NEC contracts as an interesting, side note today, really, about suggesting that sort of some of these models are broken. Now, obviously, they're also talking about their own ICE Project 13, which is kind of an IPD approach to how they do buildings. But this is the approach that we took on our own building with the intensity building, which is that kind of bringing the key stakeholders together, the general contractor, the design firm, the architect, cost consultants, the project managers, technical advisors, all those key players really left really early, pre-employers requirements really. And bringing, and we in this instance, obviously we were the supply chain part in doing that. And you just take that project, which is in referenced in the report, things in there like we reduced the RFIs by 66%. Because questions didn't need to ask. We removed the complexity, so therefore removed the cost and we removed the wasted time. And the building was delivered on time and under budget, as we know. But this was the Project 13 approach. We took some risk, risk and reward. We were part of that whole thing. We did the same with Penn Med. So really, we know this model works, but why is it not the standard approach today? This isn't necessarily new. It's been around for a while, but it's not the standard approach. And that's part of the problem. It's the exception to the rule. So business leaders, for me, I think have to be strong. They have to make brave decisions, be concise in how they take these difficult changes to the culture of their organization. They have to convince the shareholders. They have to convince the lawyers to take more risk and how they're going to do that, how they're going to adopt that within their organization. Change is never, as we know, never easy. So, if you're a global portfolio client, you're at C level, you've got to, think about selecting a procurement model based on business outcomes, driven by system data. We can't do all this reporting and do all this stuff without system data, which often gets devalue engineered, as we know, out of projects. So it's selecting those technology partners early. It's about, building global brand standards, employers' requirements, pricing framework agreements with technology companies, moving towards a more standardized approach. However, they've got to do their due diligence. You've got to think about who do you want to select as a technology partner or technology company. Such as Schneider. I mean, we truly embrace the sustainability, part of our core values. Example, we were voted Corporate Knights by Corporate Knights, the world's most sustainable company in 2021. We're still #1 in our peer group, 5 years later, and we're still in the top 10 globally. These are companies that there's a company that's adopted a truly, cultural drive to net zero. And also as part of that, looking at the truly open platforms, we have to allow our clients and ourselves and everyone else to have free access to data. It's their data, it's not our data. So it's the maturity about that, So for me, it's that we have to correct the processes, we have to correct the structure and the KPIs that are flown down from the C level to the people in the organization implementing the project outcomes that provide the data and the technology in the technology assets to give you the business outcomes that they're going to need to do ECG reporting, to do other types of reporting. Otherwise, they're just going to end up with a lot of stranded assets. So selecting technology companies that also have evolved from just product companies to a level of maturity that they can have an open, collaborative and partnership discussion where these companies don't just think about themselves. You talked about some of the how do I do this with a company that makes something. That company has to have matured, that they don't make it about themselves, that it's not just how much money can I make on one project, that they're in it as a true partner for the long term. Also that they take, we have a global leading certificated partnership program for our eco experts, for example. That aligns with our true core values, and we flow that through our partners. But what it also gives is clients true open routes to market, that they're not tied into a one-stop shop. They're not in one place, but that due diligence really has to be something, because I think that's what's also muddied the waters here historically. Technology companies and product companies have been seen in that way. So they have to really understand which companies have matured, how they've matured, and are they going to adopt this open methodology and framework that they can come and have a true partnership program and come in and be part of that early discussion, pre-employers requirements to discuss, okay, well, what do we need for our business and how do we achieve that? So for me, I think that's some of the key things that need to be addressed. And it's a brave new world. And business leaders and shareholders and everyone, risk, it's all about managing risk. But I think as the more progressive clients, I think they are looking in that direction. They're starting to move left and say, actually, we need to bring the key stakeholders and this intelligence and experience around us to allow us to move forward and drive to net zero by 2030. Yeah. And I think that's, for me, sums up that question.
Thank you. So it's not just company culture, we're almost looking at an infrastructure culture, for want of a better description.
Yeah, very much.
I'm now going to go across to Professor Jinpeng Wu at Tsinghua University, but he's also a member of WFEO, because if we're talking about cultural change on that scale, it's not just organizations, it's individuals, it's engineers, it's from young through to people later in their careers. So I'd be interested in your view on that, Jinpeng. You're on mute.
Oh, no.
There you
Okay.
go.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. It's nice to be here. I'm very happy to hear to representing WFEO's global change, global climate change mitigation, the best practice project to you. This project is WFEO's contribution to the global change, climate change. WFEO, I will use one word to introduce WFEO here. WFEO is a World Federation of Engineering Organizations. It's an international non-government organization representing global engineering experts with more than 100 national or international members and about 30 million engineers from over the world. So this WFEO's climate change mitigation best practice project is aimed to make engineers' contribution to global warming, to climate change. This project will use the engineers' voice and their engineering most successful project from each country to make that contribution to reduce the greenhouse emission and mitigate the climate change. Okay, I think this is the main project to introduce for my part.
Thank you, Jinpeng. I mean, just out of interest, I mean, obviously engineers from across the spectrum, be it consulting, mechanical, are going to play an important role in this going forward. Is that project and yourselves as part of that, are you looking at promising digital solutions within them that can actually turn around and help drive this change towards net zero and carbon reduction?
Yes, exactly. This project is try to, we collect the all WFEO member countries, their best, most successful engineering project, including their design, the idea, design, material, operation, and the whole engineering, the life process. By these, collect all these countries, the most successful project, we set up a database to hold all these successful projects from all the member countries. And then we share by digital, by the way, to share all these successful engineering, successful project experience to all the WFEO member country and the other non-member countries as well. And then based on this, we will study, we will regularly make technical report to share all the WFEO member country. And also we will study according to countries, their geography condition, economic condition, their culture, their technology level, and their economy. And then we will make the guidelines for different countries as a reference to select the best, the most suitable, successful project to their country, to guide their country's engineering work to make the best contribution to mitigate climate change. So that's the my main part of the work. And that project also including, we will also organize international conference and also training course. But as you just asked, this project is mainly focused to civil engineering and infrastructure industry, because according to the figure from 2017, the civil engineering and the building industry, the construction industry, makes the most 1/3 or more global energy use and emission contributions. So that's why we think if we can make contribution to, if we can make the civil and building industry, construction industry to reduce greenhouse gas emission, and that will be a great contribution to the world.
Thank you. So we've got collaboration across the engineering disciplines, be them many. We've got the digital sort of technology companies on side wanting to collaborate, and so it's timely now to go to Sophia Harlow, who's at Beal & Co, to ask for her views on the subject before I possibly pose a question to her to try and bring in the legal fraternity. So Sophia, over to you.
Thank you very much, Graham. Thank you for having me here to speak today, and I'm delighted to share the panel with all of the esteemed speakers that we've got. So I was reading the report, and I think it's a fascinating read, and it's very exciting and interesting to read about all these new technologies that can be put in place. It was interesting to hear from Stacey before about the procurement models that are being put in place, and how I agree that the procurement model is outdated and it's antiquated and it's long-winded, and these new technologies and the digitalization of it is going to help us streamline that process, and it's all towards this end goal that we're all trying to reach of improving our pace towards the movement towards net zero. But as a lawyer, I'm reading it thinking, oh dear, has anyone thought all of this through? Because we are moving into uncharted waters, and the key message that Shuna and I, in our article that we contributed to the report, wanted to get across is that the law is naturally reactive. You know, it's naturally reactive to what's going on. So it's not going to, these technology changes are going to be advanced, and the law is going to have to catch up afterwards. And so what you actually need to be thinking about is taking your lawyers on this journey with you, and having the people who are developing these new technologies and new softwares having an understanding of the legal risks that are associated with them. As a lawyer, I like to think that we are advising on risk management and risk allocation, and not just being a roadblock to, hang on, you can't do that because, you know, who's going to pay for it and what if it all goes wrong? But I think it's important to not get swept away at the pace of the technological change, and just sort of move these full steam ahead without thinking, oh, hang on a minute, if we're sharing all of this data, if we're sharing all of this software, where do the rights and responsibilities lie? And if there are issues, if there are mistakes, which party, you know, is going to take responsibility for that? So I definitely don't want to be a roadblock, but I do want to do definitely think that the legal people with legal expertise need to be involved in this progress of digitalization, on all of these innovative changes, to make sure that it doesn't end up that there's a frustration in the progress of this because of disputes that arise. We don't want that to happen. So let me give you some examples. So when I was reading through there's a lot of talk about open source data, and you can see how that is obviously a brilliant idea to be collaborative and to be sharing all these sort of open source software systems so that everyone's got access to the same things and we can all move together to harmonize and standardize. But if you get to the point where you're using open source data to develop some software, well, then what happens is who has the ownership of that software, and are they able to offer it to their clients on a basis that means that it's only available to their clients and not available to the others. So there's definitely a lot of legal challenges that are presented by this digitalization, but I don't think they're challenges that are going to be roadblocks. They just need to be challenges that need to be considered from the outset, and at the pace that this technology is happening, it's not something that you can decide on the idea, decide what you're going to do, and then just get legal to check it. Legal have to be involved in the process, I think, is the key message that I'd like to get across, having read the report and all the interesting innovations that are in there.
Okay, so I mean, I agree. There's there's a role for legal, frankly, in everything I've ever done in my life so far. So I'm not surprised that there's definitely a role here. But as we go through this journey of the adoption of digital technology and working with clients in the construction sector, as you do, what are the key legal considerations and potential risks that you see with digital technologies on this sustainability process? Because it is going to move very quickly, and as you say, being reactive is fine to a certain extent, but there's still going to be a degree of risk if you're going into territory where the legal system hasn't caught up. So I'd just be interested in what you see the key challenges being.
Yeah, I think the key challenge is data. The best thing and worst thing about all of this is that there's going to be a lot more sharing of data. So it means that, you know, if we're developing software to offer to our client. So for example, if I take an example of a client of ours, a big consultancy engineering firm, they have come to realize that they're not just offering engineering services now, they're offering software as a service, and they've developed models, procurement models like the ones that Stacey was talking about earlier, but also, you know, building information modeling and sort of all this modeling where you can, lots of different stakeholders can be looking at a model and inputting to it, and it can absolutely help with the pace of development of design and the pace of moving the project forward. But there come with that a lot of challenges, because if you are having international stakeholders input into that model, then you're having data across all sorts of different territories, and there are lots of legal regime, you know, there's a whole legal regime that governs that. And in the UK, we've got the GDPR. Throughout all the members on this webinar will have all got their own different jurisdiction, their different challenges. So it's, you've got to be understanding and appreciative that you can't just say, hey guys, here's a model, everyone all around the world input it in your own time zones, and look, we'll get there in a week. You've got to be thinking about, okay, well, is there personal data involved in this? And, you know, there's all sorts of aspects of data. So I think there's a real benefit from it, in that a lot of our consultancy clients are realizing that actually they're becoming more than just an engineering consultant firm. They're actually becoming a data company in some ways, because a lot of the data that they're acquiring about the project they're doing actually has a value attributable to it. So there's a benefit, and there's a scope for growth there, but there's also a reservation that would have about how that data is going to be transferred, how it's going to be used. And I think with then it looked towards the intellectual property rights and the risks around there. So it's great that businesses are being incentivized with government funding in some cases, but also just commercially, to move towards building software that will help improve the sustainability of the things that are being built or being retrofitted. However, if they're developing software that is a prototype, you know, it starts off at the project that they've got the bare bones of the software, which we would call the background IP, and they may give a client a license to use that. That software will inevitably be developed during the course of the project. So what you started off with, that model, you'll have an iterative process where the model, potentially if it's using AI, will start to learn from the data that's being input into it. And the model and software that you have at the end of the project may be very different from what you had at the beginning. And what you had at the beginning was the thing that you had IP in and that you gave the license for. And what you have at the end, well, what's that and who owns that? So that's, you know, you've got to have those rights and responsibilities clear from the outset. And we found with our clients, when they're doing public work contracts, that the public bodies are happy for engineering firms to keep hold of that data and to use it to develop their systems, as long as they then use it on the next public project, and so that they're actually getting the benefit of it. This becomes quite different when you've got private companies doing the building, because if you develop your model based on their data and you then want to sell that improved model to your next client, that's quite a different approach. So there's a definite need for thinking ahead and thinking about, okay, as this software is developing, what's happening with the rights and responsibilities and the ownership of the IP in relation to the software. And then I think I'd also say that another point that's coming out is we're seeing a lot of drafting of particular clauses moving towards net zero. So for example, in the UK, we have the Chancery Lane project, where they're suggesting drafting to be put into your clauses that all help towards, are all sort of aiming towards help towards sustainable buildings and net zero. They can be, I can completely understand the reasoning behind them, but they sometimes include wording like fitness for purpose. They include that there's a certain aspect of what you're delivering needs to be fit for purpose. Like, that is a massive red flag to any lawyer as soon as you see fitness for purpose, because it means if it doesn't meet the exacting requirements, then you are in breach of your contract. What we normally see is that you have to produce a product with reasonable skill and care. And there's another complication to that, is that you often find that insurers won't insure you against for professional negligence reasons if there's a fitness for purpose clause in your contract. So you have to be careful when you're adopting what you consider to be green, wonderful, net zero type drafting, that drafting isn't exposing you to a higher level of risk than you appreciate, or that you were previously willing to accept. So I don't want to be the Debbie Downer on all of this and say everyone that we shouldn't be moving into all these and doing all these innovative solutions. But what I want to get across to people joining today is to understand that the people developing the technology need to understand the basics of the IP law and data sharing, just so that they can flag these issues, and that then legal needs to work alongside teams that are developing this software and developing these new innovative solutions to understand what the risks are in relation to them.
No small challenges there then.
Yeah, I know. I'm sorry, but it's never easy, right? But it's certainly, everyone's incentivized. It's just making sure we don't, get ahead of ourselves before we've thought through all the consequences. And
if we're slow enough, AI might solve it for us. Whoever knows.
Oh yeah.
Okay. Actually, interestingly, that you mentioned models, because the next panelist I'm going to ask to come on is Fabian Sommer, who's at Lombardi. So I'd be interested in your views, and especially relating to some of the model challenges and workings in engineering firms that have been mentioned by Sophia.
Thank you, Graham, and thank you for the opportunity to speak at this webinar. I mean, first, the report, I think, is a very good presentation of the key opportunities and challenges we see in the digital engineering and in our engineering practice nowadays. What I found really interesting, and it's good timing, was the industry viewpoint regarding the digital protection and cybersecurity and data privacy, as this is really becoming a more and more critical topic in our day-to-day operation of an engineering business and engineering project. So thank you, Sophia, for your comments on this topic. What I can see is that the legal and the contractual framework on that are in place at the moment in terms of cybersecurity and intellectual property, using collaborative modeling platforms between different parties is really not well defined or established, and that really prevents to use the full potential of the available engineering solutions on these projects, and so in favor of a much more old-fashioned and conventional approach. So during COVID, we have seen we have seen how quickly the engineering world can adapt to a new reality of delivering projects. Basically overnight, we all worked from home and delivered projects across the world. But that development really outpaced the normal engineering practice, and what's especially in, let's say, old-fashioned engineering disciplines like civil engineering on hydraulic projects or so, they've been built for 100 years, and nothing much has changed in terms of industry standards and the way we design and approach projects. So that's a real challenge to try to close that gap between the digital reality we have at the moment and the reality of the engineers actually doing the projects at the moment. And on top of that, what's even more difficult, I think, is the development of large projects which go on for, let's say, 10 years, which is not unusual for like large hydropower or pumped hydro projects. And many of them, they started pre-COVID under a very conventional framework, and now it's very difficult to adapt them to the new reality of available solutions.
I mean, it's interesting you mentioned hydraulic projects and sort of the civil engineering projects, because and the ability to adapt, but COVID did teach us that adaptation can occur quickly. There may be some challenges with existing projects, but I'd just be interested what you see the sort of challenges, but also the opportunities being for projects that are sort of starting today in those areas, and how it will help us drive towards net zero.
Maybe I'll start with the opportunities. So certainly what we can see in the project development, really starting early on from conceptual stage of a project, the digital engineering using BIM modeling and BIM platforms really enables a very efficient and fast comparison of different project options or alternatives. And it makes it very easy to also include sustainability aspects into these evaluation of projects or project options, same as the more conventional criteria as cost, structural, technical aspects, construction time, and so on. And in terms of hydraulic projects, especially the ability to model very complex geometries and hydraulic geometries and interfaces between mechanical suppliers and civil contractors, and then to visualize the results and different options to different stakeholders of projects, including non-technical ones, is really a huge opportunity. In the end, it results in I think in faster and more efficient project development. And maybe one other opportunity is that it now becomes much easier to really model the whole life cycle of a project, and to really consider the not only the construction aspects of a project, but also the operation, maintenance aspects, durability, and so on, and accounting for the emissions throughout the life cycle of the project. In terms of challenges, I mean, I already mentioned let's say the legal challenges to create the right framework to actually use these digital engineering solutions on projects. Of course, it's a big challenge to actually define the right indicators or values for the evaluation of projects, especially when it comes to sustainability. It's much easier to compare it on cost or well-established criteria than sustainability, which is more of a softer criteria. And then being engineers, there's usually quite a reluctance to go with very innovative solutions, especially from a client side, that solutions that are not proven over years of practice, that are not according to the well-established norms and industry standards. And there's sometimes also lack of tangible benefits to adopt these new solutions. Clients very often see it primarily as an additional cost to go for or to adopt very innovative digital solutions or set up a project fully in BIM. First of all, it's a cost, but then it's hard to really quantify the long-term benefit of setting this up. So there needs still to be a mind shift that we really use that best available technology rather than keep doing what we've always been doing for 100 years plus.
Yes, so I mean, I'm hearing the point again about cultural shift, and actually we need to move together as an industry effectively across all parts of it. And it goes back to the collaboration point from Stacey. The next person I'm going to bring in is Marcio Rivera Rodriguez to get his views on it, given that there's an association and its engineers coming into and across the sector. So Marcio, what's your take on it?
Thank you. Good day to everyone. I'm going to try to speak a little bit about something that is parallel to all that we have been talking, and is how do we get the permit to get the construction? That is something where we have been working on. Let me give you just some context. In Costa Rica, that is a small Central American country, we have 5 million people, and every single time someone wants to make a construction, he needs to, the first step is to get a stamp on the blueprints, 20 years ago, to say that the engineer or architect is allowed to do that construction. After that, he can go to all agencies that need the fire marshal, who need to review the construction, and then at the end, he can go to the local government that is the one who said, yes, you can build that here. Okay, we decided 20 years ago to make a platform where all that can be done on a website, and we started doing by our association. And it's interesting because every single step that is on the reading that we have been making, we pass through it, and we can be sure that every single standardization and the adaptability, the interoperability that it is mentioned is really necessary to get it really operation. Let me say something. For example, when we started, we needed to know how the different agencies work. How many people review? Do they review all the same? Does someone need to see something first, and then someone need to see another step? And when you understand how it works, then you need to go to the legal part. Many of the things that Sophia mentioned about how important is that the legal part is part of it from the beginning. Is very important, because when you make a change, people is used to do something on paper, you may there are something that can't be changed on the first step because the legal part doesn't allow it. So you need to adapt some of the technology that it can be used in this way. For example, the firm saying that someone allowed something that is very easy to see when someone signs before in front of you. When you go to the digital world, this is something that is not so fast to understand for all the agencies. For example, it was something that we have to deal with. And for example, one of the things that the chapter about technology as not agnosticism, standardization, and open data. Once that we get this database generated on this permit operation system, we started to share the data with all the people so that people know where the country is building, what kind of building is making, more housing, more commercial, and the decision making about that can be done with information is also very important, because it's faster. Normally, before, when you got paper, it could take, I don't know, 3 months or 6 months until you elaborate all the numbers and can say how many houses has been built. And now we can make that in less time. Let's say just when the month ends, we can say how many houses or how many construction has been made in the country in that month. So there's another word that is mentioned, that is scalability. Sometimes when you start any digital process, you have to think small, because you're starting, but you have to think on how it's going to grow and how the capacity is going to grow. For example, you may start just in a computer, but then when you grow up, you may need some church. You will need some how do you mean this word, when you have a copy of the database in another place. Sorry that I don't remember the word. And that is something that it grows when you have a lot of information and you have to do it fast. And let me see something else that I saw that is very, very important, the COVID. When we faced COVID in Costa Rica, many of the economic sector was stopped. I mean, that happened to all in all the world. But the construction sector in our country could keep working because the platform is a web platform. So the engineer, the architect could keep working from his home, making the plans. He can still working with his clients, and I don't know, making the house and that. And the people from the different agencies who also has to review the plans, he could also keep working from home because the platform is a web platform that everyone can use from his home. So I think that digitalization, even that is not thinking on how it could help us on the pandemic, finally it helps us on the pandemic because many of the work can be done in a different way and it can be done alternatively. And having alternative ways to solve things is one of the keys of the digitalization. And even that I have not talked about net zero, is all this step that we have been talking. That means less paper, less travels, less many other things. So the technology really solves, and we can also think and invite, for example, emerging countries to think about how also the technology can help in getting the permits and making people building faster. The faster they can build, the more quicker the money get in the economy moves, more people get jobs, and there are a lot of advantage of getting in technology inside the construction.
Thank you. I mean, it's very interesting because you've taken digitalization back to actually leveraging the construction sector to actually create projects and effectively, I mean, to some extent, improve pipeline, which, given the amount of investment that's needed up to 2050 to meet net zero, is significant. So I'd just be interested on your views on, are there any other ways you've seen that sustainability is built into that going forward? So we're actually not just using technology in existing projects, but we're actually using it to create a pipeline of better projects for the future.
Yeah, and for example, there are some numbers that I think that is interesting to share with all the people. For example, in the 20 years ago, if we want to make a 10-story building, we may need, I don't know, blueprints of 40 different papers, and we need 5 copies because the fire marshal need 1 copy, the municipality need another copy, and we ended using, I don't know, 200 papers for that. And now on this platform, we don't have to use paper because everyone gets a copy, a digital copy of the blueprints, and they don't need it to be printed. In this country, that is a small one, we have saved 112,000 trees per year because there's no need to print them anymore. So there's a real number behind the technology. And for example, we have also measured how many times the engineer or the architect has to drive to the agencies, to the different agencies, because he has to go to let the paper, then come back to the office, then go back, and that if he doesn't get a rejection, if he get a rejection, it may be twice or more times. So we are saving more than 650 tons of carbon dioxide per year on how many times the people doesn't have to move to make that. And there's a number that it maybe can't be measured, that is the time that you don't have to be on a car, the time that you don't have to be making a line, and the time that you as an engineer can use to capacitate, to be with your family, or just simple to study, because there are many benefits that you can see on I mean, what I try to answer you, Graham, is the sustainability is not only saving trees, it's getting life for the engineers and getting life for the people. And I think that is something that when you measure, you know that digitalization can solve many things.
Thank you. I mean, I think actually at this point, I mean, I'd like to. I'm going to ask a few more questions, probably of most of the panelists, possibly singling some people out just before we go to the floor. You mentioned we mentioned leveraging it for the sector. Actually, this brings me back to Stacey, and I mean other panelists are happy to comment as well. But some of this is game changing for the industry and it's emerging technologies, but actually some of this is implementing technologies in places where it hasn't been. But how do we turn around and ensure we've got that collaborative approach and the building blocks are sound for the future rather than repeating mistakes of the past? So I'd be interested in Stacey's view and any other panelists who also want to contribute.
Yeah, certainly, Graham. And I just want to say just listening to everyone talk today has been absolutely fantastic to get everyone's different views as well. It's one thing reading it, it's another thing listening to the, and I particularly love Markel's comments there about, digitization isn't just about sustainability, it's very much about the whole cultural shift and mindset and how that can benefit us all. And equally, Sophie's comments actually around the legal side, 100% agree with Sophie. We're all on a journey together, and often the legal entities is not considered, and the insurance entities. We've very much been working with companies around that, and certainly insurance companies, to try to change mindsets, ingrained mindsets, away from what they are. So yeah, I mean, I think there's very much a sort of collaboration of how we do things. I think I'll get back to my point about it's bringing together the right parties. It's doing your due diligence around who do you want to work with, why do you want to work with them, are they a good fit for you? I know it's going to sound a bit churlish, but it's a bit like dating, Graham. To be honest with you, you have to go through this process of going, is this the right partner for me? I'm going to spend a long time with this person, hopefully my entire lifetime with this partner or group of partners, and you have to keep rechecking that. Do companies change, cultures change, CEOs change? Does that change the culture of the organization? Is it aligned still with you? So it's not just a one-stop shop of the way we do things, and we often take a triple fit approach, which is not a Schneider way of doing things. It's just an industry by a company that we've methodology way of doing things, but it helps us to understand right from the outset: are we a good fit? Are we at that level of maturity with each other? Do we have the same mindsets of the things that we want to achieve, or don't we? And if we're not, that's fine. Actually, sometimes just going through that process helps us understand where we are on that journey. And it is a journey. You don't suddenly go from, here to here, overnight. This takes time. It takes leadership. It takes fortitude to really work through these complex, these complex changes. But change has to happen because, as I said, the questions change. The risk profile has changed. The outcomes of what's going to happen if you don't do this has changed. So this is so I think it's really more about that, selecting the right partners and how you work together and not rushing into things. It's not a race, it's really a marathon. So
I'd be interested from Marcial and Fabian how you develop your partnerships and with digital companies, lawyers, etc., and how you review these going forward or form them. Marcial, do you want to go first?
I think that the legal part has to be from the beginning, and you have to not only hear your legal part. Every single agency, every single company, every single one has its legal part, so they have to talk between them, because you may have your idea of what is the legal best way to get there, but everyone has, I don't know, there's a saying in our country that where you have two lawyers, you have three opinions. I don't know if you say also that, but it's very important for them to share all the opinions and to share where are the lacks of the things that are already written, because most of the law about digital things have not been written already, because it hasn't existed any time. We 20 years ago, we didn't have anything about how signing something digital, because it doesn't exist. So it's something that has to be created. I think that letting the lawyers do their work together, and letting the technical let the work together also, and then working together. This is something I think Sophie also said, and I think Stacy also, is something very important to get to your point, that you have to go work parallel to get that solution.
Fantastic. I'll let you respond in a second, Sophia. I'm going to jump across to Fabian first. So how do you find developing partnerships and integrating digital solutions? Is it something you review often in collaborations? How does the process work for yourself?
Yes, I mean, definitely. One, maybe also touching on the point regarding the legal part and the collaboration between the legal and the technical part when it comes to a digital collaboration. I think it's, conferences and platforms such as this, where professionals can exchange ideas and understand the challenges across different companies and projects, that these partnerships can be formed. And certainly, I mean, when we team up with partners, usually it's based on, let's say, long established partnerships, and we can see that most companies are kind of following a similar pathway in terms of what kind of solutions they're adopting and developing, and also what kind of challenges they're facing. So it's probably not the most critical selection criteria. So when trying to identify developing partners on projects.
Okay, that's fantastic. I mean, and Sophia, so to put a little bit of to put some context from a question from the floor, but also a question. So collaborations in there in the report, obviously there's a significant section on cyber attacks and risks, but also there's been a question with regards to data and value in a legal and contextual framework. So how do you see those working together in a context of moving forward? Also, interestingly, there's a question towards administration and legal within agencies that procure projects, and actually how that operates with the legal sector on, if you like, the private side of the fence. So I'd just be interested in your views.
Oh, I've got to break down that question. There was quite a few parts of that question. Okay, so I was thinking when Marcel was talking there about, I like that anecdote about the 2 lawyers and 3 opinions, and I think we've got to work against the reputation that we probably have of being a roadblock, and realize that actually we can be an effective partner in this digitalization progress and the move towards making these new and innovative models that move us closer to our sustainability goals. I think when you're thinking about data as value, I think sometimes I've found, particularly clients in the construction industry, sometimes don't appreciate how valuable the data they have is. In fact, it's often the lawyers that are pointing that out to them, rather than their sort of teams who are brilliant engineers, but haven't really appreciated that actually the byproduct of a lot of the work that they're doing is that they're accumulating a vast amount of data, and that data is incredibly valuable. And I think it's one of those things, because it's not tangible. A lot of people sometimes don't realize how important it is. I have quite a useful example I had from a client recently, as they explained to me. They said, well, Uber has all it needs to become a town planner. Uber knows absolutely everything about every town that it drives in, to work out what routes people are traveling, when they're traveling, what times, what days, all this information, which they've just accumulated passively. It wasn't their intention at all, but there is now a huge amount of data in that information that a lot of different companies would be interested in. So I think that's an important point that the lawyers need to flag and highlight, that there will be data accumulated in process of working towards these sustainability goals by using innovative techniques, by using the digitalization processes that are discussed in the report, the things that we've discussed today. And who is going to own that data? Who is going to be able to use that data? And there needs to be some legal drafting around that. And there needs to be, but it needs to be that it's not that the naivety of construction companies is being taken advantage of, and they don't appreciate that this data is useful or interesting. I think, was there another aspect of your question, Graham, that I haven't covered? I think there's one thing maybe
there was just the distinction between agencies that are procuring projects and planning projects and their approach versus once it goes out to tender and the market effectively, and what you saw different there.
Well, I feel like once it goes out to the agencies, are often slow to get into this new way of working, and so these new procurement techniques that are simpler and quicker and more collaborative, I find there's quite a reluctance to move towards them. And once it goes out to people that have been using it before, have used it with different clients, have used it on different projects, it becomes much easier to pick up. And sometimes there can be a block there between that initial, we haven't done it like this before, so why would we do it like this before, and then people who've actually experienced it and realized that it can be useful and it can be helpful, and the way that Marcia was talking, it can be to everyone's benefit. And it's just making it clear that there is benefit to this beyond just, oh well, it's great because it's green and it's sustainable. There will be benefits to everyone who gets involved in working towards these goals.
I mean, we've talked about culture. I mean, Xiaoping talked about effectively sharing best practice, and we've talked about databases and things, but what I'm going to do is just for a quick sort of once around the panel is, if we turn around and drive through this innovation and change, and the report talks about accepting the transformation that has to happen, what would be your two things that you believe would actually make this change happen quicker and start on a more steady footing today? I'll start with Professor Xiaoping, as he's not spoken for a while, and then I'll go around the rest of the group just out of interest.
Okay, thank you, Brian. Yes, WFEO through this project is to try to make all the WFEO member countries to make them to share these climate change mitigation, the best practice designs from all the member countries to be shared. Different countries, although there is different geography condition, weather condition, and economy level, and that they will, based on their culture, their education, and the technology level, they will generate their specific, projects, engineering designs, projects for their country. So these can be shared between countries with similar geography, weather, and economy level conditions. So they can learn each other to share this by this kind of a database, shared database. And on the other side, the most IT technologies from the country, from developed country, the IT and the autonomous or automatic or AI technology for building. For example, people know CAD has most improved the design efficiency, engineering design efficiency, and make the most easy to delivery. But nowadays, the 3D printing technology and also automatic, construction machine, all these happen on the engineering side. So we can also, through all this technology, to improve the construction efficiency, to reduce the greenhouse gas emission, and make best project for the climate change mitigation. That's the project. I think that this to be shared for all the country on this side.
So I'm hearing the importance of collaboration across countries and various different ones. So I'll go across to Marcial next. So what would your two things be?
I think that the first thing is the standardization, to have all the things well understand, to know how it works, to all the people do the same, or the most of the people do the same. Because when you have someone who thinks that he needs something different than other one, you can't put it on a system, because the system needs to have steps. First, step 1, step 2, step 3, and if there's for some reason the step 3 doesn't go, then jump. Yeah, but if someone needs step 2.5 and it wasn't thinking in the planning of the project or the planning of the process on the planet, then you will have problems, because the solution won't work for them. So standardization and knowing exactly how it has to work, I think is the first step. The second step has to deal a lot with negotiation with the other parts. For example, in the experience that they are telling you about how we make the platform to get the permits. When we got it volunteer, when we say the engineers and architects, you can use our digital platform or you can go and do a paper. We had 33% of the tramit done web and 66% done on paper. When it was volunteer, when you decide what to do. When the government said is mandatory to use the platform, because the government said to the agencies, you have to use the platform to get the permits. Then we got 100% of that, and it wasn't until the government got involved that you get the idea to the president, to the ministry, or whoever has to take the decision, and the government make the decision, is when you get that really operating. So I think that standardization, getting all the steps very well understood, and getting the politics or getting with the government, I don't know how to mean that, but you get it portable with the when you get it when you get the government as an alliance, with alliance in your project, you will get success on your digital transformation process. I think that will be the two one.
Thank you. I'm now going to go across to Fabian and then Sophia, and then I'm going to slightly change the question for Stacey, given the collaboration of the sector and everybody giving their two things. I'd like to hear from the digital side as a key player in this as to what they think. So Fabian first, please.
So I think one of the most critical points would be the really setting the contractual and legal framework to really enable the use of these digital platform solutions between the different parties of a project. At the moment, I see that really as the biggest challenge that's really preventing us, using what's available on the market, a state-of-the-art technology on many projects. And secondly, I would agree with Marcial that setting the right standards, communicating them properly, and educating client side or owner side of projects, of government institutions and so that to set a new standard, and that will let's say also force the industry to adapt, you know, more like to also achieve a top-down implementation of these or an enabling of these platforms and collaboration tools that are actually available. I think that.
Okay, fantastic. So we've got top down, and Sophia.
Thank you. Yeah, I agree with everything that's been said, and I think if you pull it together, I think you can get to the point where there's two key issues of government intervention in terms of helping with the standardization and the uptake of these new technologies, because, you know, understandably, private companies and public entities reluctant to enter into something until they're being told they have to do it, which was Marcel's very important point there, that if it's made mandatory to follow these innovative software, whether it's a BIM model or using a certain procurement type, if they're promoted or even made mandatory by the government, then it means that uptake will start, and that we can start to learn, and we can get past the teething problems, and we can get to a point where that becomes the norm. And that's what we need, as we've all discussed today, to actually move at the pace we need towards the sustainability goals. And then the second point I think follows on from that is that, as we all know, when you ask governments to do things, it's not going to be immediate, it's not going to be straight away, it's not going to be all in sync, so that every company needs to take up, you know, it's going to pick up on all of these issues. So I think you need to be thinking at the contract negotiation stage about the rights and responsibilities and the framework of the solutions that you're putting in place, or the software that you're putting in place, and to understand that your contract is a live contract, that it's not just something you agree to and then put in a drawer and don't think about again. It's something that you have to keep revisiting as that software develops, or as the data that's inputted into it becomes more and more and more, or the program changes, or, you know, or there's a mistake, it's somebody puts an incorrect piece of data into the model, and so it needs to be amended. And so just to recognize that it's a continuing obligation and a continuing need, not just something to do at the start.
Okay, thank you. And then, as I said, I'm going to alter the question slightly, because, I mean, Stacey, you're the global segment director for Schneider, which is a digital firm. You've heard what the panelists think we need to do to embrace change, but what sort of emerging technology and trends do you see as game changers for the construction industry in achieving, because also we have the net zero behind this, and how can they be implemented? I mean, I'd be interested to pull together their views on what you think about the way forward.
Firstly, Graham, thank you very much for the question, and also for all the other panelists for their amazing, fantastic insights. As I said, it's been a privilege to be on this panel with you. So I think I've already mentioned this earlier, Graham. The question of the risk profile has, for the large asset owners, has really changed. You know, such as ECG reporting. You know, a lot of clients are really struggling to define a strategy. I mean, nobody wants to be first. You know, they were concerned about the failing or the outcomes and things like that. There's a lot of uncertainty, and as I said, I think there's a kind of responsibility there for us to support. And technology very much isn't the problem. Yeah, the data is there. Yeah, we've been putting data into the cloud from buildings and infrastructure software platforms for over 10 years, and we've been utilizing machine learning mechanisms, you know, digital twins, software digital twins, you know, in that software to give tangible business outcomes of value to these clients. So that's not new from that perspective. And now we're starting to look at AI. You know, how does AI impact? We have all this data. I think Sophie mentioned this earlier at the construction industry, and you know, and these big, large asset owners. There's a lot of data there. How can we improve? How can we modernize? How can we bring additional value for them, for ourselves, for the industry, for the planet, from that position? So, where I see the construction industry at, and as it's detailed in the report, there's actually been decline over the past 60 years in productivity in the construction industry. And the reason for that is the risk was passed down. Clients moved away from owning a certain amount of risk within the project and the outcomes, and it moved further and further away down to contractual change, which is why we end up with design and build type contract, which, as you know, really aren't going to get those informed clients and the clients who are trying to get to these requirements they're trying to achieve, for these business outcomes to where they want to be, because they have no control. And why is that important? Because, you know, like just look at some of the new EU regulations that come out over the last 3 years. Yeah, and the US take in, you know, Washington DC, the Omnibus Act, and New York, you know, Law 97, which is it comes in 2024, $268 per ton of CO2 equivalent. If you're a large portfolio client and you've got 26 buildings in New York, you've got to electrify those buildings at speed. You've only got 7 years, yeah, or 8 years, whatever it is, to get decarbonize these buildings. But at the same time, you've got to put more electric boilers in. You've got to put EV chargers. You've got to add more power, which creates problems in itself. How do you do that and decarbonize? Yes, you can do ESCOs, you can carbon offset, but that's not really the true, you know, it's part of the whole strategy. Yeah. So basically, there's a looking at how do they build out these strategies and build different businesses cases for shareholders. How do they demonstrate the return on investment to those shareholders? So I think these are kind of some of these things. I mean, we've just completed a study which we're about to release, where we looked at, we worked with a number of parties, not just ourselves. Very much believe in the fact that basically no one party has all of that knowledge. So we've had to, you know, bring in other parties who have that knowledge within their organisations, design firms, X, Y, and Z. Looking at 77% of the decarbonisation of an existing building, and what is the ROI? And that's not just looking at technology; it's looking at the glass, it's looking at building fabrics. You know, should I replace my glass? What's the return on investment? What's the impact if I optimise my BMS? How much is that going to decarbonise? What do I do if I add in a microgrid? What's the investment? What's the return on investment? Because ultimately, that's what the CFO and the CTE know to go to the shareholders and ask for financing. And green financing today, you won't even get financing from a bank really unless you're looking at green finance. So these are things that really we see, because we know, because the fastest route to decarbonisation is electrification and optimisation, which is data from electrical distribution systems and automation systems. And this also helps us really with thinking about, you know, bridging that gap to the silver tsunami that's coming. As we know, we've got an aging workforce. What do we do with this curve between our aging workforce and the millennials here? How do we bridge that knowledge gap? These are also things that we're looking at from a software perspective and how software then impacts it. If you're a cost consultant, as an example, you know, before I just did the cost plan for the client, X, Y, Z, I might be followed by the architect or the client to do this. But now the client wants to know how much carbon are you costing into my project? If 30 to 35% of the carbon is in my embedded carbon, I want to reduce the amount of embedded carbon in my footprint. That completely changes the question for a cost consultant who then has to try and find this data. So collaborating with software companies and technology companies like us, who have a software like Costex within here, you know, we own RIB as an example, but Costex is in there. So again, we can come together trying to answer some of these questions for them, bring their R&D together for what they really need. You know, we were at the FIDIC Leadership Forum recently, as you know, Graham, and listening to some of the challenges that these design firms are having, you know, shortages of talent, especially around M&E engineers. But what we see there, and what we're starting to see, is a proliferation of big, large companies buying up talent, buying up lots of smaller companies to bring them into their, because they can't get new talent. There's a shortfall of talent. I mean, in the UK alone, I think it's 36,000 shortfall in engineers every year coming into the industry, because, you know, who knew influencing was going to be such a cool thing and people can make more money out of it than being an engineer. So you can do it really quickly. You know, the pace of change, their existing staff, how do they upskill these people and get them to change and modernize as quickly as they need to with the pace of change? The proliferation of design tools, you know, there's so many design tools. When we did intensity, as you know in the report, and technical, we reviewed all the design software end to end, from architect right the way through to FM. And what we found was none of these softwares were ever designed to work together. Most of them were not cloud-based. They were machine-based. So how were we going to collaborate? Except for one, and that was Revit. Autodesk basically became pretty much the one standard global design software that everyone's sort of standardized on, which is where companies like us then make strategic purchases and investments. Again, we're talking about decarbonisation and modernisation. To do that, you've got to do electrification. Well, in that, currently there's no electrical module in Revit. So how are you going to do energy master planning? How are you going to do all these things if you need advanced electrical design tool that allows you to do that? So again, this is where sustainability company like Schneider goes, we're going to do something that's going to impact the industry, that's going to bring value to the industry. Because if it doesn't happen, we're never going to get to where we need to be. And that's very much driven down from our business leaders. So industrialization of software is really going to drive that change. It's going to create standardization, it's going to remove cost, complexity, and risk. The software amplification is very, very key for standardization. And we see that in Aviva today. So if you're in Aviva, an industrial process from 20 years ago, as an example, you have an end-to-end software that basically, from design through to implementation, the actual documentation in software gets converted into the commissioning that goes into the PLC. So you've removed all that complexity, you've removed people passing bits of paper and trying to analyze bits of paper. So, and cybersecurity, we talked about and mentioned. You want to work with technology companies who harden their products to IEC 62443-4-1, that they invest. That's cost. It doesn't come for free. You have to invest a large sum of money to basically harden your technologies, because you're constantly fighting against this massive, I think it's currently 6 trillion. It's going to be 20 trillion cost to the industry by 2028 or whatever it is. So this is real things, and it's not just about our getting data from the client systems. It's also about getting the design firms and protecting themselves. And we mentioned AI, and Sophie, I think you had a good point and some points around AI. And I love the vote. It was very 50-50. A lot of people are like, no, AI is not going to impact me. It's not going to. Absolutely, AI is going to impact you. Period. You can't afford to ignore AI. It's looking at how you're going to embrace it. I'm going to give you a definition. Sophie works in the legal area. Okay, that requires a lot of analysing of a lot of wording and a lot of data. You know what AI is really good at, that human beings aren't really good at? Analysing a lot of data and then coming up with defined risk profiles from that data and recommended training. Now, that's not saying the whole legal system is going to change overnight. But I'm just giving you an example of how it could change. And then what are you going to do with these people? How are you going to pivot them? Because you still need people. I'm saying we don't need people, but actually I'm freeing up a lot of people to do other more important things rather than very menial tasks. Take AED. AED is going to remove the need for re-engineering every time the architect moves a wall, because the cable containment will reroute, the panel size will change, the breaker size will change, all in software and automatically. That's going to save thousands of hours of cost and complexity on a project, but it frees up that resource to go and do other things. So for me, just to sort of wrap up, I think the question isn't if they should do this, and it's how. It's more they have to do this. It's how, picking the right kind of partners who are mature, approach technology partnerships in a way that fits them, that helps them on their journey to net zero. It's very much a journey that you bring all the players in, including lawyers and insurance companies who have to modernize, and modernization isn't easy because they're very risk averse businesses traditionally. But change is exciting, and it's working with parties who want to embrace that change. Sophie's on this call today. It's been fantastic. Companies who want to come in and say, here's all the problems. I don't want to be the negative person in the corner, but I'm just telling you all the risks. And actually, how are we going to work together to embrace their risks and drive that change? So just to wrap up, then it's really about that partnering and working together and working with foundations like yourself.
I think I'm going to have to, as chair, possibly apologise to our president, because I think you've basically done his summary, which I'm sure he's quite enjoying. I am going to say for the participants, we are running 4 minutes behind, so the next bit we'll do quite quickly. But there is another poll which I'm sure Stacey would like to see the result of. We now have 2,383 days to meet the SDGs. Will technology help us achieve this? Simple yes, no answer. Wow. Okay. Not quite so 50-50 on this one. 92% say yes. So it seems like technology is definitely going to turn around and be a subject for at least the next 7 years, if not more. At the moment. So I'm now going to thank the panelists. Thank you very much for your contribution and discussion. It's been very interesting. And with that, I'd like to hand over to Tony to make any closing comments and close out the webinar. Thank you.
Thanks, Graham. I'm not sure I need to summarise anything because I think a lot has been said. That's really good content, really important comments, and extremely valuable. I think the one takeaway out of this is how we get the collaboration going that's going to ensure that we get all the parts of this machine to work together to get the right outcome. With that, I'll just make a couple of comments, if I might, about upcoming events again, just to remind you that we have, sorry, I'm out of order. I'll thank Schneider Electric for their support and sponsorship for this webinar. It's been terrific, and also for the State of the World report. So thank you very much, and thank you, Stacey, on behalf of Schneider. Our next webinar, 11th of July, Golden Principles of Business Practice. And then on 26th of August, 26th of October, you'll get another one on the State of the World reports. And most importantly, please, if you have the opportunity to come and join us in Singapore for the Global Infrastructure Conference and our 110-year celebration, the 10th to the 12th of September 2023. Promises to be a great event. And I'd like to make or push another plug, which is that FIDIC has a climate change charter, which is on our website. You can get to it. You can also get through it through the QR code there, and also through www.climatechangecharter.world. The charter is intended to try and get everybody focused, all of the parties in the industry focused on what we need to do and what they can do. It's really designed to motivate them. It's not telling them what to do. It's suggesting they work out what they can do themselves within the scope of their business, the scope of their activities, the scope of their projects. So I do encourage you all to have a look at that and sign up to it. It's a commitment we all need to make if we've got any chance of getting to the climate change, the climate change that we're seeking to achieve, and reduction of our CO2 and other greenhouse gas emissions. So thank you very much for your time. Thank you to the speakers. Very much appreciate your time and effort and contribution to our webinar this evening. Thank you and goodbye.